An emotional story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She was sold like merchandise. He bought her, but never touched her. Now, alone in a mansion surrounded by secrets, she'll discover that some prisons don't need chains, only silence. Watch this story until the end, you'll be surprised. If you like love stories and romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing, Emily always knew there were worlds within worlds, layers of reality hidden behind polite smiles and firm handshakes. But she never imagined she would be part of one until the night she discovered she had been sold, as if she were a piece of art in a private, discreet auction, where powerful men decided fates with the same coldness with which they chose their imported whiskies. The Upper East Side penthouse simmered with contained tension. There were no posters, no publicity. It was the type of event that happened through whispered invitations, codes exchanged in business meetings, and handshakes that sealed more than commercial contracts. Emily was there, not by choice, but because her father's debts had transformed her into payment collateral. 24 years of life reduced to a number in a bank account, to an agreement signed with old blood and fresh tears. She couldn't stop trembling. Her cold hands held the champagne glass as if it were the only solid thing in a world crumbling around her. The black dress she wore wasn't her choice, just like nothing else that night. Someone had decided she would look more presentable in French silk, that her brown hair would look more elegant, tied in a low bun, that her green eyes would appear more mysterious with just a touch of mascara. Emily felt like a doll being prepared for display. The men around her spoke English, but with accents that betrayed distant origins. Russians who had migrated to America decades ago, bringing with them fortunes built in frozen lands and businesses that thrived in the shadows. Businessmen who controlled ports in Boston, who had connections in Washington, who moved money as if they were chess pieces on a giant board. And there, in that penthouse overlooking Central Park, they bet on human lives with the same tranquility with which they discussed the price of steel. Emily tried not to hear the conversations happening around her, but some words reached her like glass shards. Traditional family, they said about her, pure lineage, refined education, as if she were a thoroughbred being evaluated for breeding. Nausea rose in her throat, but she swallowed it back. There was no room for weakness there. It was then that she saw Daniel Lawrence for the first time. He was leaning against the glass wall overlooking the park, a glass of vodka in his right hand, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if the view could give him answers that the men around him couldn't. Daniel didn't participate in the animated conversations, didn't laugh at the crude comments, didn't look at Emily with the same poorly disguised appetite as the others. There was something different about him, a quietness that contrasted with the agitation of the environment. He was a tall man, with broad shoulders that filled the dark suit impeccably. His hair was as black as the New York night, combed back with military discipline. His face was angular, with pronounced cheekbones and stubble that gave a wild air to his natural elegance. But it was his eyes that most impressed Emily. Grey like the sky before a storm, cold like the Russian winter that ran in his veins, but with a depth that suggested layers of history she couldn't decipher. Daniel Lawrence was 42 and controlled an empire that stretched from Massachusetts to Illinois, import and export officially. But Emily knew, as everyone in that room knew, that his true fortunes came from darker territories. His father, Joseph Lawrence, had arrived in America in the 80s, fleeing wars that the Soviet government tried to hide. He had brought valuable contacts, knowledge about trade routes that few mastered, and an adaptability that had made him prosper in American soil. Daniel had inherited not just the fortune, but also the secrets, the connections that kept his company running, the agreements that ensured his shipments passed without rigorous inspection, the names in the right places that transformed problems into opportunities. He was respected and feared in equal measure. Women who got involved with him rarely spoke about the experience. Some simply disappeared from social life, relocated to other cities with generous bank accounts and confidentiality agreements. Others returned different, with a dimmed sparkle in their eyes and a tendency to avoid crowds. Emily knew all this because she had researched. In the days leading up to that night, when she learned she would be presented to interested parties, she had tried to discover everything she could about the men who would see her as merchandise. Daniel Lawrence was the most mysterious of all. There were no public scandals, no judicial processes, no ex-wives making accusations in gossip magazines. He was a well-dressed ghost, an urban legend who paid taxes and attended charity dinners. The auction began at 11 o'clock. There was no formal presentation, no microphone or stage. Simply, a man in glasses and a grey suit began to talk about Emily as if she weren't there. Age, education, physical characteristics, family history. Each word was a stab at the dignity she tried to maintain. When they mentioned she was virginal and without vices, Emily felt the world spin. It wasn't true, but apparently truth was negotiable in that environment. The bids started low, almost insulting. $500,000. $700,000. $1 million. Emily closed her eyes and tried to transport herself anywhere but there. She thought of her grandmother's house in Greenwich, where she spent summer vacations as a child. She thought of the smell of cornbread that always perfumed the kitchen, the sensation of cold grass under bare feet, the sound of rain on the tile roof, anything that would take her away from that moment. 2 million, 3 million. The voices became tenser, more competitive. Emily opened her eyes and saw that some of the men were staring at her with an intensity that made her feel naked, despite the dress that covered every inch of her skin. They didn't see her as a person. She was a trophy, an investment, a way to demonstrate power. That's when she heard Daniel's voice for the first time. 10 million. The room fell silent. Emily turned to look at him and saw that he hadn't moved from his position by the window. He hadn't raised his arm, hadn't made dramatic gestures. He had just pronounced those two words with the same tranquility with which he might have asked for more ice for his drink. $10 million, repeated the man in glasses, his voice slightly trembling. Any other bids? Emily could feel the tension spreading through the room. 10 million was more than triple the previous bid. It was a statement of intent, a way of saying the conversation was over. Some men muttered among themselves, but no one dared to increase the offer. Sold, said the man in glasses, and Emily felt as if a door had closed definitively in her life. Daniel didn't approach her immediately. He remained by the window, calmly finishing his vodka while the other men gradually dispersed. Emily stood there, still in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do. Nobody had explained the protocol for a moment like that. How to behave after being sold. How to react to the man who had bought her freedom. When he finally approached, Emily was surprised by his height. Daniel was even more imposing up close, with a presence that occupied the space around him. The cologne he wore was discreet but distinctive, something woody, with notes that reminded her of cedar and spices. He stopped at a respectful distance, hands crossed behind his back. "Emily," he said, and the way he pronounced her name made her shiver. His voice was deep with a slight accent that betrayed his Russian origins, but softened by decades of life in America. "Mr. Lawrence," she replied, surprised that her own voice sounded firm. "Daniel," he corrected. "Can we talk in private?" Emily nodded, not trusting her voice not to betray her. Daniel gestured toward a door that led to a smaller office, decorated with dark wood and books that seemed to have been actually read. He closed the door behind them and indicated a leather armchair for her to sit. "You're afraid," he said, not as a question but as a statement. "I am," Emily answered, deciding there was no point in lying. "It's natural. But I need you to know that I'm not like the other men who were out there." Emily studied him, trying to decipher his intentions. "And what are you like?" "Daniel," he repeated. "And I'm someone who understands that some situations are imposed by circumstances beyond our control. Like my situation. Exactly like your situation." He served himself more vodka from a bar set up in the corner of the office and offered a glass to Emily, who refused with a shake of her head. "I'll be direct," Daniel continued. "You'll come with me to my house. You'll live there for as long as necessary. But I won't touch you. I won't force you to do anything you don't want to do. The only thing I demand is that you stay, and that you don't ask questions about things that don't concern you." Emily felt a mix of relief and confusion. "And if I want to leave?" "You won't want to." "How can you be sure?" "Because outside of my protection you have nowhere to go. Your father's debts haven't disappeared. The men who were here today haven't forgotten your face. With me, you're safe." The reality of the situation fell on Emily like a bucket of cold water. She really had no choice. Her father had bet everything on businesses that went wrong, had gotten involved with dangerous people, had used the family name as collateral for loans he could never repay. When the collectors started showing up, when the threats became concrete, someone suggested a solution. Emily could settle the debts in a way that would benefit everyone involved. "My house is in Westchester," Daniel continued. "It's isolated but comfortable. You'll have privacy, books, access to everything you need. There will be staff, but they're discreet. You won't be bothered. And what do you get out of this?" Daniel stared at her for a long moment, as if deciding how much he could reveal. "Let's say your presence solves some problems I have. Problems you don't need to understand right now." Emily knew she should feel more frightened, but strangely Daniel's presence reassured her. There was something about him that contrasted with the coldness of the other men, a humanity hidden beneath the facade of the ruthless businessman. "May I ask some questions?" "You may." "Why 10 million? Why not let another man buy me?" Daniel took a sip of vodka before answering. "Because I know these men, I know what they're capable of, and you don't deserve that. You don't know me. I know enough." Emily felt there were layers of meaning in this response that she couldn't access. "Have you done this before? Buy women?" "Not in the way you're thinking." "What way then?" "Protect people who need protection." "Am I a person who needs protection?" "More than you can imagine." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. An older man, with grey hair and a suit that seemed to have been tailored specifically for his body, entered without waiting for permission. "Daniel," he said in Russian, but immediately corrected himself upon seeing Emily. "Mr. Lawrence, the car is ready." "Thank you, Sam." Daniel turned to Emily. "Shall we go? Now? There's no reason to wait." Emily looked around the office, as if saying goodbye to something. Perhaps it was her old life, the last vestiges of normality, before plunging into a world she didn't yet fully understand. "Can I get my things?" "Sam has already taken care of that. Your clothes and personal belongings are already in the car." Emily stood up from the armchair, her legs still trembling slightly. "How did you know I would come with you?" "Because there is no alternative." "There's always an alternative." "Not in this case." They left the office and crossed the main room, which was now almost empty. Some men were still talking in small groups, but most had already left. Emily could feel the looks that followed her, a mixture of curiosity and envy. She had been bought by the most powerful man in the room, and that meant something in their world. The elevator descended in silence. Emily studied Daniel's reflection in the elevator mirror, trying to understand the man who had bought her freedom. He seemed lost in thought, his grey eyes focused on something she couldn't see. "Daniel," she said, breaking the silence. "Yes? You said you know me. How?" He stared at her through the reflection. "Some stories are better told with time. And if I don't have time, you will." The elevator stopped at the ground floor, and the doors opened. A black Mercedes was waiting for them at the entrance of the building, with Sam at the wheel. Emily could see her suitcases in the back seat, a concrete reminder that her life had definitively changed. Daniel opened the car door for her, a gesture of courtesy that contrasted with the transactional nature of their meeting. Emily got in and settled into the leather seat, breathing deeply to try to control her nerves. "How long until we arrive?" she asked when Daniel sat beside her. 2 hours, maybe less, depending on traffic. "And after that?" "After that, you begin a new life." Emily looked out the window as the car moved away from the park. The lights of New York shone like fallen stars, and she wondered if she would ever see them again. The world outside the car continued normally, people walking on sidewalks, couples dating on park benches, life happening as if nothing had changed. But for Emily, everything had changed. "Daniel," she said again. "Yes? You said you won't touch me. But what if I want you to touch me?" The question came out before she could censor it. Daniel turned to look at her, and Emily saw something different in his eyes, a vulnerability that he tried to hide. "That won't happen," he said, but his voice was less firm than before. "How can you be sure?" "Because I know what's best for you." "And what's best for me?" "Staying away from me." Emily felt a chill, not of fear, but of something she couldn't identify. "Why?" "Because I'm not a good man, Emily, and you deserve better than that. But you bought me, to protect you, not to possess you." "What's the difference?" Daniel didn't answer. He turned to the window and remained silent for the rest of the journey. Emily tried to process everything that had happened, but her mind was like a storm. There were so many questions, So many uncertainties, so many fears mixed with a strange excitement. The car began to climb into the hills, leaving behind the city lights. Emily had never felt so alone and at the same time so accompanied. Beside her, Daniel was a solid, mysterious, disturbing presence. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew her life would never be the same. And for the first time since she had learned she would be sold, Emily wasn't sure if that was a bad thing. The mansion emerged from the darkness like a castle from fairy tales, but not from the happy tales. It was the type of castle where princesses disappeared and no one asked questions. Surrounded by high walls and wrought iron gates, the property extended for acres of perfectly manicured gardens that seemed not to belong to the real world. Emily could see illuminated fountains, stone paths that snaked between rose bushes, and ancient trees that kept secrets in their shadows. The house itself was imposing, a mixture of American colonial architecture with European touches that betrayed the refined taste of its owner. 3 floors of enormous windows, verandas with wrought iron railings, and a main entrance that looked more like a palace's. But what most impressed Emily was the silence. Even with the car approaching, even with the sound of the engine echoing in the courtyard, the mansion remained silent, as if it were sleeping and didn't want to be awakened. "This is it," said Daniel unnecessarily. Emily could feel the tension in his voice, as if he too were nervous about the arrival. Sam stopped the car in front of the main entrance and immediately got out to open Emily's door. She accepted the extended hand and got out of the Mercedes, breathing in the fresh country air. It was different from the air in New York, cleaner, loaded with the perfume of flowers she couldn't identify. But there was something else, something that made her feel watched, as if the house itself were evaluating her presence. "Welcome," said a female voice behind her. Emily turned and saw a woman of about 50, grey hair tied in an elegant bun, wearing a navy blue tailored suit that looked like it had come out of a fashion magazine. She had the posture of someone accustomed to command, but there was warmth in her brown eyes. "Emily, this is Irene," said Daniel. "She takes care of the house." "Pleased to meet you," said Irene in perfect English, but with an accent that betrayed her Russian origins. "I hope you'll feel at home here." At home. Emily almost laughed at the irony. How could she feel at home in a place where she had been brought as property? But there was something in the way Irene looked at her that suggested understanding, as if she knew exactly what Emily was going through. "Irene will show you to your quarters," said Daniel. "Tomorrow we'll talk about the arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" asked Emily. "Routine, expectations." "Boundaries." The word boundaries sounded strange coming from him, considering he had just bought a person. Emily wanted to question it, but Daniel was already walking away, heading toward a wing of the house that seemed to be his private territory. "Come," said Irene, picking up one of Emily's suitcases. "You must be tired." They entered the house, and Emily had to suppress a sigh of admiration. The main hall was a work of art, with a very high ceiling decorated with frescoes that seemed to have been painted by Renaissance masters. A marble staircase curved gracefully to the second floor, and crystal chandeliers provided soft lighting that made everything seem golden. "The house is 150 years old," said Irene, noticing Emily's fascination. "It was built by a railroad baron who wanted to impress his European wife. Daniel bought it 10 years ago and restored every detail." They climbed the staircase, and Emily could feel the weight of history in each step. The walls were decorated with paintings that seemed valuable, portraits of people who no longer existed, landscapes of distant places. Everything had an air of permanence, as if the house had seen generations pass and remained unchanged. "Your quarters are in the East Wing," said Irene, guiding Emily down a long corridor. "Daniel stays in the West Wing. There's a library, a music room, living rooms, an indoor pool, and winter gardens. You're free to use everything except Daniel's office and the basement." "The basement? He keeps wines there, and other things." Emily realized that Irene wasn't going to elaborate on the other things, so she didn't insist. They stopped in front of a double-carved wooden door, and Irene opened it with an antique key. "Your quarters," she said, turning on the lights. Emily entered and was breathless. It wasn't a room. It was a suite that could easily be classified as an apartment. The living room had navy blue velvet sofas, a marble fireplace, bookshelves filled with books, and huge windows that opened onto the gardens. A side door led to the bedroom itself, where a 4-poster bed dominated the space. There was also a closet that was larger than the room Emily had in her father's house, and a bathroom with a marble bathtub that seemed to have been sculpted by angels. "Is it temporary?" asked Emily, still processing the luxury around her. "Everything in life is temporary," answered Irene. "But you can stay here for as long as you need." "And how long will I need?" Irene looked at her with eyes that seemed to hold decades of secrets. "That depends on many things that aren't yet clear. Do you know why I'm here?" "I know that Daniel has his reasons, and I know he's not a man who acts on impulse." Emily sat on one of the sofas, suddenly exhausted. "What's it like working for him?" "Daniel is not my boss," said Irene. "He's family." "Family? My husband was Joseph's brother, Daniel's father. When we came to America, Joseph helped us get established. After my husband died, Daniel offered me this job. But it's more than that, it's a home." Emily felt a pang of something that could be envy. The idea of having a home, a place where she belonged, seemed a luxury she couldn't afford. "Is he a good boss?" "He's a complicated man," said Irene. "But he has a good heart, even if he tries to hide it." "Why would he hide it?" "Because kindness can be seen as weakness in his world, and weakness can be fatal." Emily wanted to ask more, but Irene was already heading for the door. "There are clothes in the closet," she said, "chosen especially for you. Tomorrow a seamstress will come for adjustments if necessary. Breakfast is served at 8, but I can arrange something later if you prefer. There's an intercom beside the bed, connected directly to the kitchen." "Irene?" "Yes?" "May I ask, have other women stayed here before?" Irene paused at the door and turned. "Some, but none like you." "What does that mean?" "It means you need to be careful, with Daniel, with yourself, with the feelings that may develop." "What feelings?" "The ones that are already developing," said Irene, and gently closed the door. Emily was left alone in the luxurious suite trying to process everything that had happened. A few hours ago, she was being sold like cattle. Now she was in a mansion that seemed out of a movie, with expensive clothes and a room that most people would only see in magazines. But she didn't feel free. She felt like a bird in a golden cage, comfortable, but still a cage. She explored the closet and found clothes that seemed to have been chosen by someone who knew her intimate tastes. Elegant dresses, but not flashy, silk lingerie, shoes that seemed molded specifically for her feet. Everything in the right color, the right size, the right style. It was disturbing to think that someone knew her so well. The bathroom was a dream of marble and gold, with beauty products that cost more than Emily earned in a month, at the job she had lost when her father's debts began to accumulate. She decided to take a bath. Maybe the hot water would help calm her nerves. As the tub filled, Emily looked out the window. The gardens extended as far as the eye could see, illuminated by discreet lights that created an almost magical environment. But she could also see the silhouette of men patrolling the perimeter. Guards, obviously. The question was whether they were there to protect her or to prevent her from escaping. The water was the perfect temperature, and Emily allowed herself to relax for the first time in days. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about the future, concentrating only on the sensation of temporary safety. But her thoughts inevitably returned to Daniel. The way he looked at her, as if seeing something she couldn't see herself. The tension in his voice when he said he wouldn't touch her. The vulnerability she had detected when she asked about him being a good man. There were layers to him that she wanted to explore. Mysteries that intrigued her more than they should. He wasn't just the cold businessman he appeared to be. There was depth, conflict, perhaps even kindness hidden beneath the facade of power. And that frightened her, because it meant she could begin to feel something for him beyond fear and resentment. When she got out of the bath, Emily found a silk nightgown waiting for her on the bed. It hadn't been there before, which meant someone had entered the room while she was in the bathroom. The idea should have frightened her, but strangely it didn't. There was something almost protective about the constant vigilance. The nightgown was beautiful, a teal blue that highlighted her eyes, with delicate lace that suggested elegance without being vulgar. Emily put it on and admired herself in the mirror. She looked like a different woman, more sophisticated, more mysterious. Perhaps that's what Daniel saw when he looked at her. She was about to lie down when she heard music coming from somewhere in the house. Piano, played with a skill that suggested years of study. The melody was melancholic, full of nostalgia and something that could be longing. Emily approached the window and realized the sound was coming from the west wing of the house. Daniel was playing the piano. The discovery surprised her. She had imagined him to be a practical man focused on business and power. But there he was, playing music with a sensitivity that contrasted with his public image. The melody was sad, as if he were communicating with someone who couldn't hear. Emily found herself leaving the room, going down the stairs, following the sound of the music. She knew she was probably violating some unspoken rule, but she couldn't help herself. There was something in the music that pulled her, as if it were a personal call. The music came from a room at the end of a corridor she hadn't explored yet. The door was ajar, and Emily could see Daniel sitting at the piano, completely absorbed in the music. He had exchanged his suit for a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and his hair was slightly disheveled. He looked more human like this, more accessible. Emily hid behind the door, watching him play. His hands moved over the keys with a grace she hadn't expected, and his expression was one of pure concentration. For the first time she saw him without the masks he wore in the outside world. This was the real Daniel, vulnerable, artistic, perhaps even romantic. The music stopped abruptly. "I know you're there," he said without turning around. Emily stayed motionless, hoping he wasn't sure. But then he turned and looked directly at her. "You can come in," he said. "I won't bite." Emily emerged from behind the door, feeling like a child caught doing mischief. "I'm sorry. I heard the music and you were curious." "Yes, come in." The music room was smaller than the other rooms in the house, but still impressive. Besides the grand piano, there were antique violins hanging on the walls, sheet music spread over stands, and comfortable armchairs for those who just wanted to listen. It was a refuge within the refuge, a place where the soul could express itself freely. "Have you been playing long?" asked Emily, approaching the piano. "Since childhood. My mother insisted. She said a cultured man needed to know music." "Was your mother a musician?" "She was a piano teacher in Moscow, before she met my father and came to America." Emily realized this was the first personal information Daniel had shared with her. "Is she still alive?" "She died 5 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "She would have liked you," he said, and Emily felt a strange warmth in her chest at the comment. "Why?" "Because you're not afraid of me." "Not completely, at least." "Should I be?" "Yes." Emily sat on the piano bench beside him. She was close enough to smell his cologne, to notice that he was making an effort to maintain distance, even in a small space. "Play again," she said. "What?" "The music you were playing, it was beautiful." Daniel hesitated, as if he were fighting against something internal. Then his hands returned to the keys, and the melancholic melody filled the room again. Emily closed her eyes and allowed herself to be carried away by the music, feeling each note as if it were a caress. "What's it called?" she asked when he finished. "It doesn't have a name. It's something I compose when I can't sleep." "Does that happen often?" "More often than I'd like." "What keeps you awake?" Daniel looked at her, and Emily saw something in his eyes that made her shiver. "You don't want to know." "I do. Ghosts, regrets, choices I can't undo." "Like buying me?" "No. Buying you was the right thing to do." "Then what was the wrong thing?" "Bringing you here. Close to me." Emily felt her heart accelerate. "Why is that wrong?" "Because I know I won't be able to keep my distance forever, and when I give in, I'll destroy you." "How can you be sure?" "Because I destroy everything I touch." Emily turned on the bench to face him completely. "I don't break so easily." "You don't know me." "Then let me know you." Daniel got up abruptly, as if the proximity were physically painful. "I need to go back to your room." "Why?" "Because if you stay here, I'll do something we'll both regret." "Like what?" "This," he said, and suddenly he was very close to her, his hands holding her face with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. Emily could feel his breath on her face, could see every detail of his grey eyes, could feel the heat emanating from his body. He was fighting against himself. She could see it in the tension of his muscles, in the way his hands trembled slightly. "Daniel," she whispered. "No," he said, but he didn't move away. "Why not?" "Because you deserve more than this. You deserve more than me." "And if I don't want more?" "And if I want exactly this?" "You don't know what you're asking for." "Then show me." For a moment Emily thought he might give in. She saw the exact moment when his resistance almost broke, saw desire flare in his eyes. But then he moved away, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "Go to your room," he said, his voice hoarse. "Daniel?" "Now." Emily stood up, feeling a mixture of disappointment and excitement. There was something powerful happening between them, something he was desperate to deny, but she had felt the tension, had seen the desire in his eyes. He wasn't as immune to her as he wanted to appear. "Good night," she said, heading for the door. "Emily." She turned. "Don't leave your quarters after midnight. It's for your safety." "Safety from what?" "From me." Emily climbed the stairs with her heart racing. Every word, every look, every moment of almost touch had been charged with a tension she had never experienced before. Daniel wasn't just a man who had bought her. He was a man who desired her, who fought against that desire, who considered himself dangerous to her. Back in her room, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, the vulnerability he had shown while playing piano, the internal struggle she could see in his eyes. He had said he destroyed everything he touched, but she was beginning to suspect the truth was more complex. Perhaps he was the type of man who sacrificed himself to protect others. Perhaps his coldness was armor, not a real characteristic. Perhaps the distance he maintained was an act of love, not indifference. Emily lay down, but sleep didn't come easily. She listened to the sounds of the house, trying to identify each noise. Footsteps in the corridor, doors closing, the distant sound of voices talking in Russian, and occasionally, music. Daniel was still playing piano, and the melancholic melody seemed to speak directly to her soul. She was beginning to understand that her situation was more complex than she had imagined. She wasn't just a prisoner in a golden cage. She was a woman who had been placed in the orbit of a man who fascinated and frightened her in equal measure. And for the first time since she had learned she would be sold, Emily wondered if it hadn't been destiny, and not just circumstances, that had brought her there. Finally, the music stopped. Emily imagined Daniel climbing the stairs, passing her corridor, resisting the temptation to knock on her door. The tension between them was palpable, growing, inevitable. He had said he wouldn't be able to keep his distance forever, and Emily was beginning to hope he was right. Because against all logic, against all prudence, she was beginning to wish he couldn't. Emily woke to the sound of rain beating against the windows. It wasn't ordinary rain, but a storm that seemed to want to tear down the house. She looked at the clock on the bedside table and saw it was almost 11 in the morning. She had slept longer than she had intended, but her sleep had been restless, full of fragmented dreams where Daniel appeared sometimes as savior, sometimes as captor. She got up and went to the window. The view of the gardens was completely different in the rain. The red rose bushes seemed to bleed, the trees swayed as if they were dancing a frenzied dance, and the stone paths had transformed into small streams. There was something wild and primitive about the storm that made her feel even more isolated from the outside world. A soft knock on the door made her turn. It was Irene, carrying a tray with coffee, fruits, and still warm bread. "Good morning," she said, entering without waiting for a response. "I thought you might prefer to have breakfast in your room with this rain." "Thank you," said Emily, realizing she was famished. "Has Daniel already woken up?" "Daniel never sleeps late. He left early to handle some business in Greenwich, but he should be back this afternoon." Emily felt a pang of disappointment. She had hoped to see him at breakfast, perhaps continue the conversation from the night before, but maybe it was better this way. She needed time to organize her thoughts, to understand what was happening to her. "Irene," she said, sitting in the armchair by the window, "may I ask you something?" "Of course. You said yesterday that other women have stayed here. What were they like?" Irene hesitated, arranging the plates on the tray unnecessarily. "Different. Each one dealt with the situation differently." "Situation?" "Being here, belonging to Daniel. I don't belong to him." "No?" Emily stopped chewing the bread. "No. He may have bought me, but that doesn't mean I belong to him." "Then why are you here?" "Because I had no choice." "And now? Do you still have no choice?" Emily looked at Irene, trying to understand what she was suggesting. "Is there something you want to tell me?" "I want to say that choices always exist, even when they seem not to exist." "What kind of choice would I have?" "The choice to decide who you are in this situation, victim or participant, prisoner or guest." Woman bought or woman who chooses to stay. And what's the difference? Power. When you see yourself as a victim, he has all the power. When you see yourself as a participant, you share the power with him. Emily reflected on this. Since she had arrived, she had felt like a piece being moved on a chessboard. But maybe Irene was right. Maybe there were ways to regain some control over the situation. The other women, she said, did they choose to be victims or participants? Most chose to be victims. It was easier, safer. And what happened to them? Daniel took care of them, provided houses, money, new identities when necessary, but they never really lived. They merely existed. And you think I should choose to be a participant? I think you've already chosen. From the first night, when you went down to hear the music, Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest. Irene was right. She had chosen to be curious, to be brave, to be active. She hadn't stayed hidden in her room crying about the situation. She had gone after what she wanted to know. Irene, she said, can you show me the rest of the house? Of course, but remember what Daniel said about the office and the basement. I'll remember. They finished breakfast in a comfortable silence, listening to the rain that continued to fall heavily. Emily wore a navy blue dress she found in the closet, flat shoes and a cashmere cardigan. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who seemed to belong to that house, to that world of discreet luxury. The tour of the mansion was revealing. Emily saw rooms that looked like museums, with antique furniture and works of art that were probably worth more than she would earn in several lifetimes. There was a library that occupied 2 floors, with books in Russian, English, French, and many other languages. A ballroom that seemed not to have been used for years. A formal dining room that could easily accommodate 20 people. But what most caught her attention was the number of portraits scattered throughout the house. Men with intense gazes, women of ethereal beauty, children who seemed to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. They all had something in common, the grey eyes that Emily recognized from Daniel. His family, said Irene, noticing Emily's interest in the portraits. They all have the same eyes. It's a characteristic of the Lawrences. They say it's a mark of the lineage. Lineage? Old family, old traditions, old responsibilities. Emily stopped in front of one particular portrait. It was a young woman, perhaps her age, with brown hair and green eyes that were almost identical to hers. The resemblance was so striking that Emily had to touch her own face to make sure she wasn't looking at a mirror. "Who is this?" she asked. Irene approached and looked at the portrait. Catherine Wallace, Daniel's great-grandmother. She looks like me. Yes, she does. Is it a coincidence? Rarely are things coincidental in Daniel's life. Emily felt a chill in her stomach. What does that mean? It means that perhaps you should ask more questions about why you're here. I'm here because I was sold to pay my father's debts. That's one reason. But the reasons we see aren't always the only ones that exist. Before Emily could ask more, the sound of a car arriving interrupted them. Irene looked out the window and smiled. Daniel is back, she said. Earlier than expected. Emily felt her heart accelerate. She didn't know why she got nervous in his presence, but she couldn't control the reaction. Perhaps it was the intensity of his gaze, the way he seemed to see through her, or perhaps it was something more primitive, more visceral. I'll leave you to explore, said Irene. Remember what we talked about. Emily was left alone in the gallery of portraits, looking again at Catherine Wallace. The resemblance was disturbing. It wasn't just the facial structure, but something in the expression, the posture, even the way the hair fell over the shoulders, as if they were the same person separated by generations. Impressive, isn't it? Emily turned and saw Daniel at the entrance to the gallery. He had changed from business clothes to dark pants and a white shirt, and was slightly wet from the rain. He seemed more relaxed than the night before, but there was still tension in his shoulders. The resemblance, he said, approaching, it's almost supernatural. Who was she? Catherine? She was an extraordinary woman, intelligent, brave, stubborn. How did she die? Who said she died? Emily stared at him, confused. She's your great-grandmother. Of course she died. Yes, she died, but not as she should have. What does that mean? Daniel stopped beside her, so close that Emily could feel the heat of his body. It means that sometimes people die because of the choices they make, and sometimes they die because of the choices others make for them. You're speaking in riddles. I'm speaking truths that are too complicated to be said directly. Emily turned to face him. Then speak indirectly. Speak in any way, but speak. Catherine was promised in marriage to seal an alliance between families. Like many women of the time, but she fell in love with another man and ran away with him on the night of the wedding. And she was found dead 3 days later, she and the man she had run away with. Emily felt a chill. Murdered? It was never proven, but everyone knew. And that has something to do with me? Daniel stared at her for a long moment. It has everything to do with you. I don't understand. Not yet, but you will. Emily was getting frustrated with the evasive answers. Why can't you just tell me the truth? Because the truth can be dangerous. And I've already put you in enough danger just by bringing you here. What kind of danger? The kind that kills women who look like Catherine. Emily felt as if the floor were disappearing beneath her feet. Are you saying my life is in danger? I'm saying there are people who have an interest in you. People who know about your lineage, about your family, about things you can't even imagine. What lineage? What family? My parents are ordinary people. Your parents are ordinary people. But your mother wasn't. My mother died when I was a child. Yes, and her death wasn't accidental. Emily leaned against the wall, feeling dizzy. You're crazy. I'm trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From men who killed your mother. From men who killed Catherine. From men who will kill you if they discover where you are. This doesn't make sense. It does. You just need time to understand. Emily ran her hands through her hair, trying to organize her thoughts. Are you saying you brought me here to protect me? I'm saying I bought you because it was the only way to get you out of their reach. Whose reach? People who believe certain lineages should be preserved or destroyed. And mine should be destroyed? Depends on who you ask. Emily looked again at the portrait of Catherine. Was she from my family? Catherine was your great-great-grandmother. That's impossible. It's true. How can you know that? Because my family and yours have been intertwined for generations, because there are contracts, agreements, promises that were made before you were born. What kind of agreements? Blood agreements, protection agreements, union agreements. Emily felt as if she were in a nightmare. Union? You were promised to me before you were born, just as Catherine was promised to my great-grandfather. That's medieval. It's tradition. And if I refuse? You can't refuse something that's already been decided. Emily looked at him with anger. I can refuse anything. You can. But that would mean your death. You would kill me? I wouldn't. But others would. The same ones who killed your mother when she tried to break the agreement. Emily was trembling now, not from cold, but from anger and fear. Are you telling me I'm a prisoner forever? I'm telling you that you're a woman in danger, and that the only way to keep you alive is to keep you close to me. And if I prefer to die free than to live a prisoner, then you're exactly like Catherine, and that scares me. Emily realized there were tears in her eyes. Why do you care? Because you don't deserve to pay for agreements you didn't make. Because you don't deserve to die for being who you are. And because you want me. Daniel was motionless. That doesn't matter. It matters to me. It shouldn't, but it does. Emily approached him, seeing the internal struggle in his eyes. You want me, but you can't have me because that would mean consummating the agreement you're trying to avoid. I want you more than anything I've ever wanted in my life, he said, his voice hoarse. But wanting you means condemning you. And if I'm willing to be condemned, then you don't understand what you're saying. I understand that I prefer to live a real life for a short time than to live a false life forever. Emily put her hand on his face, feeling the stubble scratching her palm. I understand that you're suffering as much as I am. Don't touch me, he said, but he didn't move away. Why? Because if you touch me, I'll touch you back. And if I touch you, I won't be able to stop. And if I don't want you to stop, then you'll destroy us both. Emily moved closer until their bodies were almost touching. Maybe some kinds of destruction are worth it. Emily, you said you wouldn't be able to keep your distance forever. How long do you think you can hold out? I don't know. I know. Not much longer. Emily rose on her tiptoes and kissed the corner of his mouth, a soft touch that was like lighting a match near gasoline. Daniel closed his eyes and trembled. Don't do this, he whispered. Why? Because I'm not strong enough to resist you. Then don't resist. I can't. You can. You can choose to touch me, to want me, To have me. At least for today. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we deal with the consequences. Daniel opened his eyes, and Emily saw that his resistance was crumbling. You don't know what you're asking for. I'm asking to be touched by the man who wants me. I'm asking to feel something real before I die. You're not going to die. Everyone dies, Daniel. The question is whether we live before that. Emily kissed his cheek, then his jaw, then the point where his neck met his shoulder. Daniel was trembling now, his hands clenched into fists as if he were fighting against a force greater than himself. Emily, he said, his voice broken. Yes? If I touch you, there's no going back. I don't want to go back. You don't understand the implications. I understand that you want me and I want you. I understand that we're fighting against something bigger than both of us, but that today, at this moment, we can still choose. And you choose this, you choose me? I choose you. I choose now. I choose to live. Daniel stared at her for a long moment, and Emily saw the exact moment when his resistance broke. She saw when he stopped fighting against himself and decided to fight for her, for them, for that moment. Then come, he said, taking her hand. Come with me. Emily allowed him to guide her through the corridors of the mansion, up the stairs, past rooms she hadn't yet seen. He led her to the West Wing, to his territory, to the place where she shouldn't be. Daniel's bedroom was an extension of himself, masculine, elegant, with a huge bed and windows that opened to a view of the gardens she hadn't seen before. There were books piled on tables, carefully arranged clothes, and a scent that was purely his. Are you sure? He asked, stopping in the middle of the room. I'm sure I want you, said Emily. I'm sure I don't want to live in fear forever. I'm sure that if I'm going to be condemned for something, I prefer to be condemned for something I chose to do. Daniel approached her slowly, as if she were a wild animal that might run away at any moment. You're beautiful, he said, touching her face with a reverence that made her tremble. You are too. I'm a dangerous man, Emily. I'm a man who has killed, who has lied, who has destroyed lives. You're a man who saved me, who plays piano when he can't sleep, who fights against himself to protect me. And you forgive me for that. I forgive you for everything. Daniel kissed her then, gently at first, then with an intensity that made her forget everything that wasn't his taste, his scent, the sensation of finally being in the arms of someone who wanted her completely. And for the first time since she had arrived at that house, Emily felt free. Not free to leave, but free to choose. Free to want. Free to live, even if it was for a short time. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the bedroom, Emily had found her own kind of storm, and she wasn't afraid of it. Emily awoke wrapped in arms that made her feel more secure than she had felt in her entire life. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Daniel's bedroom, creating golden patterns on her bare skin. She could hear his regular breathing, felt the warmth of his body against her back, and for the first time since she had arrived at that house, she felt exactly where she should be. The previous night had been a revelation. Not just physically, although Daniel had been a more attentive and passionate lover than she had ever imagined possible, but emotionally, it had been as if two broken pieces had fit together perfectly, creating something new and complete. They had talked until late, between caresses and confessions, and Emily had discovered layers of vulnerability in Daniel that he hid from the world. He moved behind her, and Emily felt his lips lightly touch her neck. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice hoarse from sleep. "Good morning," she replied, turning to face him. The morning light made his grey eyes seem clearer, younger. Without the constant tension he normally carried, Daniel seemed almost vulnerable. Emily touched his face, running her fingers through the stubble that had grown during the night. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Last night. Touching me. Breaking your own rules." Daniel held her hand, kissing the palm. "I regret many things in life, but you, never. Even knowing the consequences? Especially knowing the consequences." Emily moved closer, kissing him softly. "So what do we do now?" "Now we live," he said. "For as long as we can, we live. And after that? After that, we face whatever comes." Emily could feel the change in him, the decision to surrender to the situation, to stop fighting against the inevitable. There was something liberating about this surrender, but also something frightening. "Daniel," she said, "yesterday you mentioned contracts, agreements. Can you explain better?" He sighed as if he knew this conversation would be inevitable. Our families have a long and complicated history. My great-grandfather, Isaac Lawrence, and your great-great-grandfather, Michael Wallace, were partners in businesses that went beyond the legal. They controlled trade routes between Russia and other countries, including America. And that has to do with the agreements. It has everything to do with it. When they realized their businesses were being investigated by the Russian government, they needed a way to protect their assets. They created a secret society, with rituals, blood oaths, and rules that should be followed by all future generations. Emily felt a chill in her stomach. What kind of rules? Rules about marriage, about inheritance, about how the businesses should be conducted, and rules about how the lineages should be preserved. Preserved how? Through arranged unions. Children of allied families should marry each other, to keep the blood pure and the secrets safe. And I was chosen to marry you. You were promised to me before you were born, just as your mother was promised to my father. Emily sat up in bed, pulling the sheets to cover her body. My mother? But she married my father. She ran away, she broke the agreement. She fell in love with an ordinary man and decided to live a normal life. And she was killed for it. Not immediately. They waited years. They let her have you, let her believe she was safe. But when you turned 20, when you became an adult, they came after her. Emily felt tears burning her eyes. She died to protect me? She died because she refused to hand you over. Because she preferred to die than to see you forced to live the life she had rejected. And my father knows this? Your father suspects. That's why he got so indebted, why he drank so much, why he finally agreed to sell you. He thought that if you went directly to me, you would be safe. Emily couldn't stop crying. He sold me to protect me. He sold you because it was the only way to keep you alive. If you had continued living a normal life, they would have come after you. The same way they came after your mother. Who are they? The guardians of the lineage. Men who believe certain agreements are sacred, that certain traditions must be maintained at any cost. Emily got out of bed, starting to pace around the room. So my whole life has been a lie. Not a lie, a temporary protection. And now that you're with me, that we've consummated the union, you're officially under my protection. By the ancient agreements, no one can touch you without facing me first. But you didn't want this. You fought against it. I fought because I know what it means. You're no longer free to choose your own life. You're tied to me, to my business, to my enemies. Emily stopped by the window, looking at the gardens. And if I don't care about that? You do care. You just haven't realized it yet. No, she said, turning to face him. I don't care. Do you know why? Why? Because I love you. The words came out before she could think about them, but the moment she said them, Emily knew they were true. She loved Daniel. She loved his complexity, his hidden vulnerability, his internal struggle to be good despite the world he lived in. Daniel was motionless, as if the words had the power to destroy him. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because it makes everything harder. Or it makes everything simpler. Emily, do you love me too? That doesn't matter. It matters to me. Daniel got up from the bed, putting on a robe. You don't understand. Love isn't a luxury in my world. It's a weakness that can be exploited. Then let's be weak together. It's not that simple. It can be if you let it. Daniel approached her, holding her face between his hands. I love you more than my own life. I've loved you since the first time I saw you, long before last night. I love you in a way that scares me, that makes me want to be a better man. Then be one. I can't simply stop being who I am. I'm not asking you to stop being who you are. I'm asking you to be who you are with me. Daniel kissed her, and Emily felt all the desperation and love he carried. When they separated, she saw tears in his eyes. You don't know what you're asking, he whispered. I'm asking you to trust me, trust in us. And if I can't protect you, then we protect each other. A noise from downstairs interrupted them. Loud voices, hurried steps, an agitation that wasn't normal in the quiet mansion. Daniel tensed immediately, all the muscles in his body contracting. Stay here, he said, heading for a closet where Emily could see he kept weapons. What's happening? Probably nothing, but it's better to be prepared. Daniel took a pistol and put it in his waistband, then put a shirt on over it. The transformation was instantaneous. From the vulnerable man who had made love to her to the dangerous businessman who controlled an empire. "Daniel," said Emily, suddenly frightened. "Yes? Last night changed something, didn't it?" "Between us?" "It changed everything. For better or worse. I don't know yet." An urgent knock on the door made them turn. It was Sam, and Emily could hear the tension in his voice even through the door. "Daniel, you need to come down, now." "What happened?" "We have visitors." "What kind of visitors?" "The kind you won't like." Daniel turned to Emily. "Get dressed, quickly. And don't leave this room until I come back." "Daniel, promise me." "I promise." He kissed her quickly, a kiss that tasted of farewell, and left the room. Emily heard the key turning in the lock and realized she was locked in, not to imprison her, but to protect her from something specific. She dressed quickly in the clothes she had worn the day before, trying to process everything that had happened. Daniel loved her. She loved him. They had consummated a union that had been predestined since before her birth, and now there were visitors that he didn't want her to see. Emily approached the window, trying to see what was happening in the courtyard. There were 3 black cars parked at the entrance, expensive but discreet cars. Men in dark suits were talking with Daniel and Sam, and even at a distance, Emily could see that the conversation wasn't friendly. One of the men turned, and Emily saw his face. He was older, perhaps 60, with grey hair and a well-trimmed moustache. There was something familiar about him, something that reminded her of old photographs she had seen in her father's house. Suddenly, the memory returned. She had seen that man before, in a photo that her mother kept hidden, a family photo, taken when she was very young. The man in the courtyard was her uncle, Victor Wallace, her mother's brother, a man she thought was dead. Emily felt her blood freeze. If Victor was there, if he had found the mansion, it meant that the guardians of the lineage had found her too. And if Daniel had fought so hard to protect her from them, his presence there couldn't mean anything good. She tried to open the door, but it was locked. She tried the window, but it was too high to jump. She was trapped, forced to watch a scene that could determine her future without being able to do anything about it. The conversation in the courtyard was getting more agitated. Emily could see Daniel gesturing, his body language indicating extreme tension. One of Victor's men took something from his coat, a gun, and for a moment Emily thought they were going to shoot Daniel right there. But then Daniel nodded, clearly agreeing to something. The men put away their guns and everyone headed into the house. Emily lost sight of them, but she could hear voices coming from downstairs. She approached the door, trying to hear what they were saying. The voices were loud enough for her to catch some words: agreement, consummation, transfer. And then, clearly, she heard her own name. "Emily must come with us," said a voice that she recognized as Victor's. "She stays here," Daniel replied, his voice hard as steel. "It's not your decision. It never was. It became my decision last night. Forced consummation is not valid under the ancient agreements. It wasn't forced. It was her choice. The choice of a woman who didn't know the facts has no value." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, horrified. They were talking about her as if she were property, as if her feelings and desires didn't matter. And worse, they seemed to be suggesting that her night with Daniel had been part of a larger plan. "She knows the facts now," said Daniel. "And still she chose to stay. Then you won't mind if we ask her personally? I won't allow you to see her. It's not a question of allowing, Daniel. It's a question of fulfilling the agreement." "What agreement?" "The agreement you signed when you bought her. You have a right to her for a probationary period. That period is over." Emily felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Daniel had signed an agreement? There was a probationary period? Nothing he had said about protecting her was true. "The probationary period is 1 year, said Daniel. It was 1 year. But the rules changed when you consummated the union without the council's permission. I don't need the council's permission to touch my woman. She's not your woman. She's property of the lineage until the council determines otherwise." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Property of the lineage? Council? Had Daniel lied about everything? "Bring her," said Victor. "Now." "No." "Then we'll go get her." Emily heard footsteps on the stairs, voices approaching. She moved away from the door, trying to find somewhere to hide, but there wasn't anywhere. The room was large, but there wasn't enough furniture to hide behind. The key turned in the lock and the door opened. Daniel entered first, followed by Victor and 2 other men. Emily had never seen such a desperate expression on Daniel's face. "Emily," said Victor, smiling as if they were old friends. "How good to see you again." "I don't remember you," said Emily, trying to keep her voice firm. "Of course not. You were very young when we met. I'm Victor Wallace, your mother's brother. My mother never mentioned you. Your mother tried to forget many things, but blood can't be forgotten." Emily looked at Daniel, searching for answers, but he avoided her gaze. "What do you want?" "We want to take you home," said Victor. "To the place where you belong. I belong here. You belong to the lineage, and the lineage has decided it's time for you to know your true responsibilities." "What responsibilities?" "You are the last woman of the Wallace lineage. Your blood is necessary to keep certain traditions alive." Emily felt nauseous. "What traditions?" "Traditions you don't need to understand. Just fulfill. And if I refuse, you have no choice, just as your mother had no choice." "My mother chose. She ran away, married who she wanted, lived the life she wanted." "And died for it," said Victor coldly. "Just as you will die if you don't cooperate." Emily looked at Daniel, who finally found his courage to speak. "She's not going with you." "Daniel," said Victor, his voice loaded with threat, "you know what the penalty is for interfering with lineage property." "She's not property." "She is, and you've always known that." Emily felt as if she were waking from a dream. "Daniel," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "did you know they would come?" "Emily, did you know?" "I hope to have more time." "More time for what?" "To make you love me enough not to want to leave." The words hit Emily like a slap. "You used me." "No, I love you." "You used me," she repeated louder. "All of this was a plan. To make me fall in love with you, to make me believe you were protecting me." "I was protecting you." "Lies." "Emily, please let me explain." "Explain what? That I'm property? That you're all playing with my life as if it were a game?" "It's not like that." "Then how is it?" Daniel didn't answer, and his silence was answer enough. "Enough talk," said Victor. "Emily, you're coming with us. Now, and if I don't want to?" "Then you'll be forced." Emily looked around the room at the men surrounding her, at Daniel who had betrayed her trust, at the impossible situation in which she found herself. She had thought she had finally found freedom, love, a real life, but everything had been an illusion. "May I get my things?" she asked. "You won't need anything," said Victor. "Where you're going, everything will be provided." Emily nodded, suddenly strangely calm. "Then let's go." "Emily," said Daniel, taking a step toward her. "No," she said, moving away. "Don't touch me, ever again. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You're all monsters. And I was foolish enough to believe that one of you could be different." Emily followed Victor out of the room, down the stairs, across the hall where she had admired the family portraits. Everything seemed different now, sinister, as if the house itself had been conspiring against her. At the front door, Emily turned to look at Daniel one last time. "I really loved you," she said. "That's what makes all of this even more cruel." "Emily, please." "Goodbye, Daniel." She got into the car with Victor, feeling as if she were entering her own coffin. As the car drove away from the mansion, Emily looked through the rear window and saw Daniel standing at the door, a solitary figure in a setting that suddenly seemed cold and empty. She had found love and lost it in the space of a night. She had discovered her true identity, only to discover that it didn't matter what she wanted or felt. She had been free for a few hours, and now she was being taken to a fate she couldn't even imagine. But one thing had changed. Emily was no longer the frightened woman who had been sold at an auction. She was a woman who had loved and been betrayed, who had discovered her own strength and determination. And if Victor and the guardians of the lineage thought she would be an easy victim, they were very wrong. She had learned to fight, and this time she would fight for herself. The guardians of the lineage property was hidden in the mountains of Virginia, on an estate that seemed to have been built to impress and intimidate in equal measure. The main house was an imposing stone and wood construction, with towers that rose like accusing fingers against the sky. Perfectly manicured gardens extended for acres, but there was something artificial about them, as if nature had been forced to obey a human vision of perfection. Emily was taken to a room on the 3rd floor, far enough from the ground floor to make any escape attempt risky. The room was luxurious but clearly a prison. Windows with decorative bars, a single entrance with a lock on the outside, and furniture that seemed to have been chosen more for its beauty than for any consideration of comfort. "You will stay here until you're ready for the ceremony," said Victor, watching Emily explore the environment. "What ceremony?" she asked, although she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "The consecration ceremony, where you will officially assume your role in the lineage. And if I refuse?" "There is no refusal. There is only acceptance or consequences." "What consequences?" Victor smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll find out if you decide to be stubborn." He left, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts. She sat on the bed, trying to process everything that had happened. 2 weeks ago, she was an ordinary woman with ordinary problems. Now she discovered she was part of an ancient lineage, promised to rituals she didn't understand, and that she had fallen in love with a man who may have lied about everything. The thought of Daniel brought a physical pain to her chest. She had given herself to him completely, had believed his words of love, had chosen to stay despite all the risks, and everything had been a lie. Or had it? Emily remembered the expression on his face when Victor arrived, the desperation in his eyes when she was taken away. There was something there that wasn't acting. Daniel had fought for her, even knowing he was at a disadvantage. And his tears when he confessed he loved her. Tears couldn't be faked so easily. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. A young woman entered, carrying a tray with food and a folded dress in her arms. "I'm Amanda," she said. "I'm here to help you." The woman was about 30, blonde hair tied in a strict bun, and blue eyes that seemed to have seen more than they should. There was something familiar about her, something Emily couldn't identify. "Help with what?" asked Emily. "With your preparation. The ceremony is in 3 days." "What kind of ceremony?" "Nobody has explained anything to me." Amanda hesitated, as if deciding how much she could reveal. "It's a binding ceremony, where you will be officially united with the lineage." "Bound to whom?" "To the one who was chosen for you." Emily felt a chill in her stomach. "It's not Daniel, is it?" "No. Daniel lost his rights when he consummated the union without permission." "Then who?" "Alex Peterson. He's one of the oldest members of the council." Emily remembered having seen that name in some of the documents she had found in Daniel's mansion. Alex Peterson was an older man, rich, and according to rumors, cruel. "I won't marry him," said Emily. "It's not marriage," said Amanda. "It's binding. It's different." "Different how?" "Marriage can be undone. Binding is forever." "And if I refuse?" "You won't refuse." "How can you be sure?" Amanda approached the window, looking at the gardens. "Because I also refused once, and I learned that some things are inevitable." "You were also bound?" "I was. 10 years ago. To a man I didn't know, didn't love, didn't choose." "And how was it?" "I survived. You will survive too." Emily approached her. "But you didn't live." "No, I didn't live. I merely existed." "I don't want to merely exist." "Then you'll have to be smarter than I was." Emily caught something in Amanda's voice, a subtle suggestion. "Are you trying to tell me something?" "I'm trying to tell you that there are ways to survive that don't involve complete submission." "What ways?" "Ways that you'll have to discover on your own." Amanda left the dress on the bed and headed for the door. "Wear this. Dinner is in 2 hours. You'll meet the council." "Amanda," said Emily before she left. "Yes?" "Do you know Daniel?" "I do." "Is he really a bad man?" Amanda paused at the door without turning. "Daniel is a man who fights against his own nature. That makes him dangerous, but not necessarily bad." "Does he love me?" "Only he can answer that." "But do you think so?" "I think Daniel never loved anyone before you. And men like him don't know how to love without destroying." Amanda left, leaving Emily alone with the dress and her thoughts. The dress was beautiful, a dark blue that would highlight her eyes, but there was something sinister about it. It was the type of dress a woman would wear to be sacrificed, not to dine. Emily decided she wouldn't wear the dress. If she was going to meet the council, it would be in her own clothes as her own person. It was a small act of rebellion, but important to her. 2 hours later, when they came to get her, Emily was wearing the black dress she had worn the night she was sold. There was something poetic about it, wearing the same clothes she had worn when her life changed for the first time. The dining room was a huge hall, with a table that could easily accommodate 20 people. But only 5 men were seated there, all older, all wearing expensive suits, all observing Emily with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen in a laboratory. "Emily," said Victor, standing up, "allow me to introduce the council." One by one, the men stood up and introduced themselves. Russian names, varied ages, but all with the same aura of power and cruelty. And then came Alex Peterson. He was a man of 60, tall, with perfectly combed grey hair and eyes that seemed to see through people. When he kissed her hand, Emily felt as if snakes were crawling on her skin. "What a pleasure to finally meet you," he said. "You're even more beautiful than the descriptions." "Thank you," said Emily, quickly withdrawing her hand. "Sit down," said Victor. "We have much to discuss." Dinner was a surreal experience. The men talked about her as if she weren't present, discussing her qualities, her lineage, her reproductive attributes as if she were cattle. Emily ate in silence, observing, learning, planning. "The ceremony will be tomorrow night," said Victor, "under the full moon as tradition dictates." "Tomorrow?" asked Emily. "I thought it was in 3 days." "We changed the date. There are complications that need to be resolved quickly." "What complications?" "Daniel is making moves," said Alex. "Gathering allies, preparing some kind of rescue." Emily felt her heart jump. "He's coming to get me?" "He'll try," said Victor, "but he won't succeed. After tomorrow you'll be bound to Alex, and Daniel will have no more claims on you." "And if I don't want to be bound?" "You have no choice," said Alex, "just as your mother had no choice. My mother chose to run away, and died for it. Do you want the same fate?" Emily looked around the table at the impassive faces of the men who controlled her destiny. "I want to understand why this is so important to you. Why my lineage matters so much." "Because you're special," said Victor. "Your blood carries something that was promised to us generations ago." "Promised by whom?" "By your ancestors. By Catherine Wallace, who made a deal when her life was spared." Emily remembered the portrait in Daniel's mansion. Catherine didn't die. She died, but not before making a deal that saved her daughter. What deal? That every woman of her lineage would serve the Guardians when necessary. That the Wallace blood would be used to keep certain traditions alive. What traditions? Ancient rituals, ceremonies that guarantee prosperity, power, protection. Emily began to understand. "You believe in magic? We believe in the power of blood, in the power of lineage, in the power of tradition. And you believe my blood has some special power?" "We know it does." Emily stood up from the table, suddenly nauseated. "You're crazy." "We're pragmatic," said Alex. "And tomorrow night, you will be ours." "Never. Then you will die, like your mother died." Emily left the dining room, ignoring Victor's shouts for her to return. She ran up the stairs, locked herself in the room, and for the first time since she had been captured, allowed herself to cry. She cried for the mother who had died to protect her. She cried for the father who had sacrificed himself to save her. She cried for Daniel, who perhaps really loved her but had lied about everything. And she cried for herself, for a life that would never be normal. But when the tears ended, Emily felt something new being born inside her. It wasn't despair or acceptance, it was determination. She wouldn't be a victim. She wouldn't be a sacrifice in an ancient ritual. She wouldn't be anyone's property. The next morning, Amanda came to prepare Emily for the ceremony. She brought a white dress, long, that looked more like a shroud than a wedding dress. "You don't have to do this," whispered Amanda as she brushed Emily's hair. "I don't have a choice." "There's always a choice. Sometimes it's just a question of being willing to pay the price." "What price?" "The price of freedom, or of death." Emily looked at Amanda through the mirror. "Are you telling me to die?" "I'm telling you to live. Really live. Even if it's for a short time." "How?" "There's a way out of here, but it's dangerous." "More dangerous than being bound to Alex?" "Different, but maybe worth it." Amanda took a key from her pocket. "This key opens the kitchen's back door. At 3 in the morning, the guards change shifts. You'll have 5 minutes. Why are you helping me?" "Because I recognize my own cowardice in you. And I hope you'll be braver than I was." Emily took the key, feeling its weight. "And if I'm caught? Then you'll die. But at least you'll die trying to be free." "And you? What will happen to you?" "They'll never know it was me. There are many ways for a key to disappear." Amanda finished arranging Emily's hair and stepped back. "You're beautiful. Alex will be satisfied." "Amanda," said Emily. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Live first, then you can thank me." The hours passed slowly. Emily was taken for a ritual bath where older women bathed her with perfumed oils and recited words in Russian that she didn't understand. Then she was taken to a room where an elderly man drew symbols on her skin with red ink. "They're symbols of protection," he explained, "and of binding." Protection against what? Against resistance, against escape, against death. Emily understood that the symbols weren't to protect her, but to protect the ritual from her, to ensure that she couldn't free herself even if she wanted to. When the time for the ceremony came, Emily was taken to a garden at the back of the property. There was a circle of ancient stones, lit candles, and the council wearing dark robes. Alex was in the center, wearing a white robe that made him look more like a priest than a groom. "Approach," said Victor. Emily walked to the circle, each step heavy as lead. She could feel the power of the key in the pocket of the dress, the promise of freedom that Amanda had given her. "You, Emily Wallace, accept your binding with Alex Peterson, representative of the Peterson lineage, guardian of the ancient traditions?" "No," said Emily. "It's not a question," said Victor. "It's a statement. You accept." "I don't accept." Alex approached her, grabbing her hand forcefully. "You have no choice." "Yes, I do." Emily tried to pull away, but Alex held her more tightly. "You will accept, or you will suffer the consequences." "Then I suffer the consequences." "Very well," said Victor. "Let it be recorded that Emily Wallace chose resistance. Let it be recorded that she chose pain." One of the men of the council approached, holding something that shone in the candlelight. It was a knife ancient with symbols engraved on the blade. "If you don't accept binding voluntarily," said Victor, "then you will be bound through blood. Your blood will mix with Alex's, and the binding will be sealed." "You're insane," said Emily. "We're right," said Alex, "and you will be ours." The knife approached Emily's skin and she closed her eyes, preparing for the pain, but then she heard a sound that made her open her eyes. Gunshots. The property exploded into activity. Guards running, shouts, more gunshots. And then emerging from the shadows like a ghost was Daniel. He wasn't alone. Sam was with him, and other men that Emily didn't recognize, all armed, all determined, all moving with military precision. "Let her go," said Daniel, pointing a gun at Alex. "You have no authority here," said Victor. "I have this authority," said Daniel, indicating the gun. "Now let her go." "She no longer belongs to you," said Alex. "She belongs to the lineage." "She doesn't belong to anyone," said Daniel. "She belongs to herself." Emily felt tears of relief burning her eyes. Daniel had come for her. He had risked everything to save her. "Daniel," she said. "I'm here," he replied. "I'm here to take you home." "You can't simply take her," said Victor. "There are agreements, traditions, consequences." "To hell with the agreements," said Daniel. "To hell with the traditions, and to hell with the consequences." "You're making a mistake," said Alex. "She carries something that cannot be refused." "She carries my child," said Daniel, "and that makes her untouchable." Emily felt as if the world had stopped. Child she wasn't, or was she? She thought of the morning sickness, the fatigue, the sensitivity she had felt. "Daniel," she whispered. "I know," he said. "I always knew, from the first morning." "How?" "Because I recognized the signs, because I was waiting for it. Because this is what completes the prophecy." Emily looked at Victor, who had gone pale. "What prophecy?" "The prophecy that the last woman of the Wallace lineage would give birth to the first child of the union of the lineages. A child who would be more powerful than any ritual, more important than any tradition." "And you knew this," she said to Daniel. "I suspected, but I wasn't sure until now. So you really did use me. I used you, to save us both, to save our child." Emily didn't know what to feel. Anger at being manipulated again, relief at being saved, excitement at carrying Daniel's child. "Take me home," she said. "Always," Daniel replied. He took her in his arms, and Emily allowed herself to be carried. But as they moved away from the property, she knew the war was just beginning, because now she wasn't just fighting for her freedom, but for the life of her child. And that changed everything. Escaping from the Guardian's property was like escaping from a nightmare. Emily could hear gunshots echoing behind them, shouts in Russian, the sound of cars being started in pursuit. Daniel carried her in his arms, running through the forest that surrounded the property. followed by Sam and his men who formed a protective barrier around them. "We made it," whispered Emily against his chest. "Not yet," replied Daniel without slowing down. "They'll follow us, and they won't stop until they find us." "Then where are we going?" "To a place where they can't touch us. To a place where we can disappear." Emily didn't ask more. She trusted Daniel despite everything that had happened, despite all the lies and half-truths, because in the end, when it mattered, he had chosen to save her. He had risked everything for her. They reached a clearing where 3 helicopters were waiting for them. Emily recognized some of the men who were there. They were people she had seen in Daniel's mansion. Loyal employees who apparently knew much more about his world than she had imagined. "Where to?" shouted Sam over the noise of the rotors. "To the island," Daniel replied. "It's time to end this once and for all." The island. Emily remembered having heard mentions of a private property that Daniel owned, a secret refuge where he could disappear when necessary. But from the tone of his voice, she realized it wasn't just a refuge. It was a fortress. The flight lasted 2 hours, during which Emily remained nestled in Daniel's arms, feeling the reality of her pregnancy slowly settling in. There was a life growing inside her, a life that was half hers and half his. The idea should frighten her, but strangely it reassured her. Finally, there was something that was completely theirs, something that no one could steal or negotiate. "Are you sure?" she asked, touching her still flat stomach. "I'm sure," replied Daniel, covering her hand with his. "From the first morning when you came down to hear me play piano, there was something different about you, something I recognized." "Recognized how?" "My mother was pregnant several times. She always said there was a special glow in women who carried a new life. You had that glow." Emily remembered the morning in question, how she had felt different, more sensitive, more connected to everything around her. "And you didn't tell me?" "I wasn't sure, and even if I had been, it wouldn't change anything. You would still be in danger." "But now it changes?" "Now it changes everything. By the ancient agreements, a woman pregnant with a Lawrence's child is untouchable. She cannot be sacrificed, cannot be used in rituals, cannot be bound to another man. So you saved me by getting me pregnant. I saved you by loving you. The pregnancy is just a consequence." Emily looked out the helicopter window, seeing the ocean stretching infinitely below them. "And if Victor doesn't accept the ancient agreements, then he dies, along with anyone who tries to harm us." The hardness in Daniel's voice reminded her that he was more than just a man in love. He was a dangerous man, accustomed to solving problems with violence when necessary. And for the first time, Emily felt grateful for that hardness. The island appeared on the horizon like a green jewel surrounded by turquoise-blue waters. It was larger than Emily expected, with a main house that seemed to have been built to withstand any attack. High walls, narrow windows, a strategic location on top of a hill that offered a complete view of the surroundings. "How long have you had this place?" she asked. "My father bought it 30 years ago. He always knew that one day we would need a place where we could disappear from the world. And now we need to? Now we need to." The helicopter landed on a helipad built in the gardens of the house. Emily could see they weren't alone. There were dozens of armed men positioned strategically around the property. Daniel had prepared for a war. "How many people know about this place?" she asked. "Only the people I trust with my life, and now with yours." Emily was taken inside the house, which was surprisingly cozy despite its external appearance. There were lit fireplaces, comfortable furniture, and windows that opened to spectacular views of the ocean. But Emily also noticed the details that revealed the true nature of the place: the thick walls, the reinforced doors, the security system that monitored every entrance. "You're preparing a siege," she said. "I'm preparing a war," corrected Daniel. "Victor won't give up easily. He'll come after you, and when he comes, we'll be ready. And if he brings an army, then we'll face an army." Emily sat on a sofa in front of the fireplace, suddenly exhausted. "Daniel, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise that there will be no more lies between us. No matter how painful the truth is, I prefer to know." Daniel knelt before her, taking her hands. "I promise. But in exchange, I need you to promise me that you won't try to protect me by making dangerous choices. You won't try to sacrifice yourself for me. Like you did for me? Exactly like I did for you. We're both guilty of loving too much to think clearly." Emily smiled for the first time in days. Then we're a perfect match. We're a doomed match, said Daniel. But I prefer to be doomed with you than saved without you. They were interrupted by Sam, who entered the room with a grave expression. Daniel, we have movement. 3 ships approaching the south coast. Victor. Has to be. No one else knows about this place. Daniel stood up, instantly transformed from the man in love to the military leader. Defense positions. I want snipers in the towers, men on the beach and the house in total lockdown. And Emily? Emily stays with me. Always. Daniel, said Emily, standing up, I can fight. You're pregnant. I'm pregnant, not invalid. And this is my life too. I won't risk you or our child. Then don't leave me alone. Let me stay with you. Daniel studied her for a moment, clearly struggling between his protective instinct and the knowledge that she had the right to participate in the fight for her own freedom. You stay behind me at all times, he said finally. You don't make decisions without consulting me. And if I tell you to run, you run. I agree. Then let's end this. The next hours were a mixture of tension and preparation. Emily watched Daniel coordinate his defenses, distribute weapons, position men. He was a born strategist, thinking 3 steps ahead, preparing for any eventuality. You've done this before, she said, several times. My world isn't peaceful, Emily. It never has been. Do you regret that? I regret many things, but I don't regret having been born in this world, because it was this world that brought me to you. The first attack came at sunset. It wasn't a frontal attack, but an infiltration attempt. Victor's men trying to climb up the cliffs on the east side of the island. They were detected by motion sensors and neutralized before they could approach the house. They're testing our defenses, said Daniel. The real attack will come during the night. How do you know? Because it's what I would do. Emily spent the following hours watching Daniel command his private little war. He was relentless, efficient, and completely focused on protecting her. But she could also see the cost on his face, the tension of knowing he was fighting not just for his own life, but for the life of the woman he loved and the child she carried. Daniel, she said during a pause in the fighting, even if we don't make it out of this alive, I want you to know that I don't regret anything. Don't talk like that. I need to talk like this. I need you to know that I chose this. I chose you. I chose this life with all its risks. Emily, let me finish. I love you. I love you completely, without reservations, without conditions. And if we die tonight, at least we'll die together. Daniel kissed her then, a desperate kiss that tasted of tears and promises. We're not going to die, he said. We're going to live. We're going to raise our child. We're going to build a life together. How? With Victor and the Guardians always chasing us? Because after tonight, there will be no more Victor. There will be no more Guardians. There will be no one left who can threaten us. Are you going to kill them? I'm going to do whatever is necessary to protect my family. The real attack began at 3 in the morning. It wasn't an infiltration attempt, but a frontal assault. Victor's men attacked from 3 directions simultaneously, using fast boats and military equipment. Emily could hear the sound of gunshots, explosions, the shouts of wounded men. They're forcing their way in, said Sam through the radio. How many? Asked Daniel. Many. More than we expected. Then we switched to Plan B. What Plan B? Asked Emily. The plan where we confront Victor directly, where we end this once and for all. Daniel picked up a gun and handed it to Emily. Do you know how to use this? My father taught me when I was a teenager. Then remember what you learned, but use it only if you have no other choice. They left the house through the underground tunnel that Emily didn't know existed. The tunnel led them to a secret beach on the north side of the island, where a boat was waiting for them. Where are we going? Asked Emily. To Victor's ship. We're going to end this on his territory. That's suicide. No, that's strategy. He won't expect me to come to him. The journey to Victor's ship was the longest of Emily's life. She could see the lights of the battle on the island, could hear the sounds of the war being waged for her freedom. But she was going in the opposite direction, straight into danger. Daniel, she said. Daniel. She. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. But if it does, then I die protecting you and you escape, take our child and build a life far away from all this. I can't live without you. You can, and you will if necessary. Victor's ship was a luxury yacht converted into a floating fortress. Emily could see guards on the railings, heavy weapons mounted on the deck. It was a ship built for war, not for pleasure. "How are we going to get in?" she asked. "Through the front door," said Daniel. "Sometimes audacity is the best strategy." They approached the ship openly, without trying to hide. Emily could see that the guards had detected them, but they weren't shooting. They had probably been ordered not to kill Daniel until Victor could speak with him. "Daniel Lawrence," said a voice through a loudspeaker. "What a surprise to have you visit us." "I came to negotiate," shouted Daniel back. "Come aboard, but leave your weapons." "I won't leave my weapons." "Then don't come up." Emily touched Daniel's arm. "Leave the weapons, trust me." "Emily, trust me, like I trusted you." Daniel hesitated, then left his gun in the boat. Emily did the same, but kept a small knife hidden in her boot. It wasn't much, but it was something. They went aboard the ship and were immediately surrounded by guards. Emily could feel the tension in the air, the promise of violence that hung over everyone, but she kept her head high, refusing to show fear. Victor was waiting for them in the main salon, wearing a tuxedo as if he were going to an elegant dinner. He smiled when he saw them, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Daniel," he said, "and the lovely Emily, what a pleasure to have you here." "I came to make a deal," said Daniel. "What kind of deal?" "Let Emily go, she's pregnant. By the ancient agreements, she's untouchable." "Ah, yes. The pregnancy. Very convenient." "It's not convenient, it's true." "Perhaps it is. But even so, she still carries the Wallace blood. She still needed to complete the ritual." "What ritual? You're insane if you believe blood has magical power." Victor laughed. "Magical power, no, my dear Daniel. Political power, economic power. Power over men who believe in magic." Emily felt as if a final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. "You don't believe in the rituals?" "Of course not. But many powerful men do, and they're willing to pay fortunes to participate in ceremonies they think will give them power. So all of this is about money. Everything has always been about money. And control. The men who participate in our rituals become our debtors, our pawns. They believe they owe their luck to our ceremonies. And you need my blood to do that? We need you to do that. Your presence, your blood, your participation. It makes it all more real for them." Emily looked at Daniel, who seemed as shocked as she was. "So my mother died for money. Your mother died from stubbornness. Just as you will die if you don't cooperate." "I won't cooperate." "Then you will die. You and your child." "No," said a voice behind them. "They won't die." Emily turned and saw Amanda entering the salon, followed by several armed men. But they weren't Victor's men. They were men that Emily recognized from Daniel's island. "Amanda," said Emily. "Sorry for the delay," said Amanda. "But I needed to be sure all the true Guardians were aboard before acting." "You're a traitor," said Victor. "No, I'm someone who got tired of being used. Someone who decided it's time to end this farce." "What farce?" "The farce that you're guardians of ancient traditions. The farce that there's something sacred in what you do. The farce that women like Emily and I have no choice." Amanda approached Emily. "You asked me if there was a way out. Well, this is the way. End them once and for all." "How?" "By destroying the organization, by exposing their lies, by freeing all the women they control. And you can do that. We can do that. Together." Emily looked at Daniel, who nodded. "Do what you think is right," he said. "I support your decision." "Then I choose to fight," said Emily. "I choose to end this." What followed was more than a battle. It was a revolution. Amanda had spent years documenting the Guardians' crimes, collecting evidence, identifying their victims. With the help of Daniel and his resources, she had mounted an operation to destroy the organization once and for all. Emily watched Victor and his men being arrested, saw files being seized, saw women being freed. It was the end of an era, the end of a tradition that had destroyed generations of lives. "It's over," said Daniel, hugging Emily as the sun rose over the ocean. "Is it really over? Really over? You're free. Our child is free. We are free." Emily allowed herself to cry then, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time in her life, she was truly free to choose her own destiny. "And now?" she asked. "Now we live," said Daniel. "We get married, we raise our child, we build a life together. A normal life. Normal is a relative concept, but a life that's ours, where we make our own choices. I would like that." then that's what we'll have. 6 months later, Emily was on a private beach in the Caribbean, wearing a simple white cotton dress, waiting for Daniel at the improvised altar they had set up on the sand. There were no guests, just Sam as a witness and Amanda as maid of honor. It was exactly how Emily had dreamed it would be. When Daniel appeared, wearing a white shirt and linen pants, Emily knew she had made the right choice. He wasn't perfect. Their life wouldn't be easy, but it was the life she had chosen. It was the life they would build together. "Are you sure?" he asked when he reached the altar. "I've never been so sure of anything," she replied. "Even knowing that I'll love you obsessively for the rest of my life? Especially knowing that. Then let's get married." The ceremony was simple, the words sincere, the promises real. When they kissed as husband and wife, Emily felt as if she were beginning a new life. Not just a life free from the traditions that had imprisoned her, but a life built on love, choice, and freedom. "I love you," said Daniel. "I love you too," replied Emily. And for the first time since they had met, there were no shadows between them, only light, promises, and a future that belonged entirely to them. 3 months later, Emily gave birth to a girl. Not the son the prophecies predicted, but a daughter who would be free to choose her own destiny. They named her Catherine, in honor of the woman who had fought for freedom generations before. "She'll have a different life," said Daniel, holding his daughter in his arms. "She'll have the life she chooses," corrected Emily. "Exactly." And as they watched the sun set over the ocean, Emily knew she had found more than love. She had found freedom. She had found the courage to fight for her own life. She had found the strength to break chains that had lasted for generations. She had been born to be sold, traded, used, but she had chosen to live. She had chosen to love. She had chosen to be free, and that choice had changed everything.